even if it negatively affected attempts to combat the disease. And one of the pieces of misinformation I kept hearing over and over again in Lucknow was that AIDS was spread by mosquitoes. This was told to me about, numerous people told me this. Well, why were they telling me this? Why were they saying this? They were saying it because it's a family-friendly way of explaining to someone how you got AIDS. You know, if you got it from a mosquito, well, you didn't get it from any from sex or from intravenous drug use or any other way. The obedience that young Indians had towards their families in major life decisions so mystified me that I became convinced that there must be some sort of fundamental psychological difference in the way that Indians make decisions. In fact, I'm not the first person to think so. This difference in decision-making or in ethical life is what some thinkers, namely classicist E.R. Dodds and anthropologist Ruth Benedict, once called the shame culture, guilt culture dichotomy. What does that mean? It means that some cultures are guilt-based, like our own. That means our ethical life and our decisions are orchestrated by a feeling of guilt. Guilt is a private experience in which a person's internalized personal sense of justice is at odds with his behavior. But in other places and at other times, and in other cultures like India, ethical life is a public affair, a matter decided by the group, the caste, the religion, and more often than not by the family. Bad behavior elicits a feeling of societal shame in this scheme, a fear that one's community may suffer as a result of a person's behavior. In India, to quote the writer Ruth Benedict, reputation is familial rather than individual, end quote. This rule of the family has a direct impact on a lot of things in India, including population issues. Young Indian newlyweds that I talked to felt a tremendous pressure to provide their parents with grandchildren, especially male grandchildren. Despite the widespread understanding that India had a population problem, young people continued to get married at an early age and to get relatively large families. That was what their parents wanted. And in the Hindu religion, there's a belief that an individual is born with a debt to their parents that they can only repay by providing them with children. This leads to some surprising problems. Some couples seek in utero investigations into their child's gender, followed sometimes by the abortion of female fetuses, and the result is a gender ratio in some Indian states that is out of whack. According to the 2001 census figures, there were fewer than 900 women for every 1,000 men in Punjab. Similarly, family affects the political process in profound ways through the caste system. Individuals often vote as their family votes in India, and the family often votes according to their caste. Caste affects political life on all levels. Last summer, Sona arrived home in tears to tell me that the city government had decided to knock down her settlement, her shantytown. I was curious to see it, and so I went down to the river. She lived down by the Gomti River in a shantytown, a place where no one really wanted to live. The Gomti River was polluted and it smelled bad. No one wanted to live next to it. And only the poorest people lived down there. And when I went down there, I saw that the bulldozers had arrived and they were going to knock down her shantytown, her basti. It's called a basti. I noticed, though, that other shantytowns were being left alone. And I asked people that I met, why was it that the city government was picking on this shantytown and not the other shantytown? And I was always told the same thing. Sona shantytown, this shantytown voted Congress. And because it voted Congress, the ruling party had decided to make an example of it. Kuldeep Nair, a former minister in the Rajya Sabha, the upper house in New Delhi, recently wrote on GulfNews.com regarding the state elections in Uttar Pradesh, quote, "My worry is that the voter is succumbing to appeals in the name of caste and religion, and not assessing the merits and demerits of candidates. As the nation goes from one election to the other, whether it is for parliament, the state legislature, or the local bodies, it appears that criminals, castists, and moneybags are gaining ground," end quote. His point is one that many people have been making about Indian democracy. And states such as Uttar Pradesh voters cast their votes for their caste. The Bahu Samaj Party, or the BSP, appeals to outcasts. The BJP, or Bharatiya Janata Party, appeals to high caste Hindus. The Samajwadi Party, or the Socialist Party, appeals to mid-caste Hindus and Muslims. And the Congress Party these days appeals to almost nobody. Each party seems to offer a thin ideological patina to barely conceal caste and communal conflicts. In the last 2 years, as I attempted to make sense of politics in Uttar Pradesh, I never saw a debate about issues, nor were the elections an occasion for discussing substantial matters of policy. Similarly, protests at Lucknow University often centered on caste quotas. I waited in vain to see the students protest as they do in America against a war or for an environmental concern. India is a pluralist democracy, although at times it seems like a plurality of castes and communities more than a plurality of competing political visions. And if caste affects politics, politics in turn affects the caste system in profound ways. Over the last 50 years, the Hindu right-wing and regional caste organizations have reimagined the very idea of caste. They have reconceived the historical origins of the institution, which they would like to depict as a benign, religiously inspired division of labor, perverted by later conquerors such as the Mughals and the British. These views may be historically indefensible, and Hindu right-wing meddling in the content of grade school history books is indeed troubling. But looked at from another angle, these efforts are an attempt to defend caste from the vilification it sometimes receives from the political left. Outsiders might not realize how condescending it may sound to conservative Hindus in places like Uttar Pradesh when Prime Minister Singh, or as he is often called in Lucknow, Sardarji, Mr. Sikh, a non-Hindu, calls untouchability a, quote, blot on humanity, end quote, as he did in December 2006. An individual's very concept of self is in part determined by his or her caste. And while most low-caste Hindus desire freedom from prejudice and unfair economic treatment, they do not necessarily desire freedom from the caste system itself. And I think this is a common misperception. My colleague Nick Schmidl, writing on Slate.com on April 16th, asked the intriguing question upon encountering low-caste Hindus in Bangladesh, quote, if your Hindu faith considered you untouchable, wouldn't you consider conversion, end quote. But the most common answer to this question over the last 2.5 millennia has been no. And the reason that low-caste Hindus do not convert in large numbers to Buddhism or Islam, with the occasional exception, is that blood is thicker than water. Hinduism is as much an ethnicity as a religion, and caste is an essential part of that identity. Most low-caste and outcast Indians that I know are no more likely to renounce their caste because of its historic disadvantages than an Irish person is likely to renounce his Irish ancestry because his ancestors historically got the short end of the stick. India remains an overwhelmingly Hindu nation, despite centuries of Muslim domination, centuries of Christian domination under the British, and in the Middle Ages, centuries of Buddhist and Jain domination. Because, to repeat my quote from Ruth Vanita, in India reputation is familial, not individual, end quote. And family in the larger sense includes generations of ancestors stretching back for centuries. To convert to another religion means admitting that your ancestors were somehow in error, that their toil on the bottom of the caste system was the result of some sort of catastrophic existential miscalculation. Few castes, families, or individuals can bring themselves to that conclusion, whatever the short-term benefit, making conversions relatively rare, even for the most untouchable Hindus. When I wrote about the Pasi caste, or the pig-herding caste in Lucknow, I saw them engaged in a process of rewriting their caste history. They were rewriting Indian history itself to put their caste